But what if I don't want to? Let's get straight into it. If something's not okay, what's the point in forgiving? Why should you forgive? Should you forgive in the first place? Listen, I've had a lot of dealios in my life where I've really had to question this. I've really had to figure out if I have an answer to this question. And maybe sometimes I don't, honestly. Maybe sometimes there isn't a good answer. I've had a biological father who hasn't really been present in my life. I had a big deal with my pandas disorder, which in that case, it wasn't necessarily a case of forgiveness, but I really had to think about how am I going to move forward with this now. I was bullied in high school. I was in a toxic relationship in college. I've had a lot of deals where I don't know what the next step is. Is there forgiveness? I mean, is it even possible, right? And every single time that I've gotten into it, I've realized forgiveness is not only for the other person, right? We think of it as for the other person. You're doing a favor to them. You're saying, I forgive you, right? That's not necessarily the case. Forgiveness is not just for them. It's about them. They are involved in that process. But let's be honest, it's not just about them. If I were to forgive my dad for not being present in my life just because of him, I don't think there'd be a point there. Does he want the forgiveness? I don't think he really cares. So why would I? Did he do something wrong? Yes. Did it make my childhood more difficult? Yes. So why would I want to forgive him? The answer is you. Me in this case. Forgiveness is, I almost try and think of it not as forgiveness. The word forgiveness makes me think it's all about the other person, right? And yes, it is partly there, right? But forgiveness is really about finding peace in your heart, in who you are and where you are in order to move forward. Peace in your heart about whatever happened, about whoever was involved in order for you to move forward. That to me is what forgiveness is. It's not saying what you did was okay. It's about acknowledging, hey, maybe what you did isn't okay, but I am going to find peace in my heart and I'm going to have peace surrounding you for me to move on. And, maybe that helps you move on too if you feel like you need that forgiveness, right? And that's where I have felt like I've had to redefine the definition over the years. And sometimes I wouldn't even call it forgiveness, right? I often do because I've done a good job redefining what it means to me in the aspect of I don't even think of it the way that I used to, but I definitely used to think of forgiveness as like why would you forgive someone that did something wrong to you, right? I mean, it makes it sound like, yes, I'm saying what you did is okay. And that's not the case, right? I'm using my dad as an example here, right? Because I feel like that's something that I don't have to get into much detail. All I can say is just I didn't have a very present dad, and I think most people can understand what that means. And so that's not what I'm talking about here as the only thing, but just in a general aspect, that's the best way to describe it, because I do really believe that forgiveness is something that we have to redefine and we have to find in our own heart. I don't think that even to forgive someone, I don't think you necessarily need to tell the other person, right? Forgiveness does not mean you want to maybe be best friends with the other person. It doesn't even mean that you want to trust the other person. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you trust this person. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden you want to like this person. It doesn't mean any of that. All it means is that you are finding peace in your heart to no longer be hung up on the past, to no longer have anger, bad feelings, grudges, to be willing to move forward in your life. And that to me is what I think has been really important in talking about conversations with other people, and even just having my own definition of forgiveness in life is figuring out what does that mean for me. And a lot of times when I talk to people about forgiveness, they are very shocked to see that I, forgave someone for something, or that I'm in that process of doing that, or whatever it may be at the time. And I always try to explain that, at least for me, if I don't forgive someone eventually, it feels like I'm trapped in this prison. It feels like I have a lot of anger and resentment. And I think in some point of the healing process, that's okay. We all need to go through those feelings. We need to go through those stages. But at some point, you get to a point where you realize, I'm hurting myself with these feelings. And I just need to move on. I just need to move forward, and I just need to be willing to continue my life. Be willing to continue my life despite what happened, despite whatever I feel like I need to forgive for. I want to move on in my life because I am more than that. That to me is what forgiveness is. But then how do you actually get to that process of actually forgiving? What does that mean? Well, instead of thinking of it as forgiving that person or forgiving for them and being like, hey, yeah, I forgive you. Like those are three really difficult words to say. I forgive you. I forgive them. Like that is really hard thing to do. And at some moment, I think it just feels right. And you know if you're in a place where you can do that. But in other moments, it's really difficult to know, like, actually, can I do that? And the first thing that I ask, at least for myself, is, do I feel like I can move on? Do I feel like I can move on? And if something like this comes up again, is it going to give me anger, or is it going to put me back in the past? It might give me anger, right? Because say someone does the similar thing, right? Of course you're going to feel those emotions. But is it going to put me back in the past where I feel like I need to blame for the past, where I feel like I'm reliving in the past, where I feel like I would go back to square one with my journey of healing? And when the answer is, I don't think so, that's when I feel like I realize, hey, I might be there, right? And then I honestly just think of the words like, do I feel like saying, I forgive so-and-so. I forgive for whatever situation. Does it feel right? Or does it feel icky still? Does it feel painful still? Because if it does, then hey, maybe you're just not ready. And that's okay. There is no timeline to forgiveness. It could take years. It could take a lifetime. It could take a few months. It depends on the situation. It depends on you. It depends on this other party. It also just depends on life, right? Experience, circumstances. There's so many different parts that go with it. But when I started thinking about forgiveness as less of a word and less of a, hey, this is a predetermined what I have always thought of forgiveness as, like I had a lot in my subconscious about what it meant to forgive. And I realized that I don't think that's actually the case. Because if that was the case, if it really had nothing to do with me and only to do with forgiving someone, I don't know if there would ever be a reason to forgive, right? Because part of why you forgive is not only for the other person. I mean, yes, that is there, but not only for that, but also because you are letting yourself free, right? You are telling yourself, I'm ready to move on. I mean, moving on, not just like moving on saying, okay, well, this happened, I'm mad about it, and I'm gonna live my life no matter what, right? Because you should be doing that no matter what. Live your life, right? But I mean moving on in this case of moving on and realizing that if the past were to resurface, if this thing were to come up again, it wouldn't put you back at square one. I used to have some anger with my biological father. And if he were to do something like that now, and it still happens, right? I still have these moments where I recognize that in the past, I would have been angry. I would have been frustrated. It would have put me back at square one. And now when I see these things, it's almost like it's able to wash off of me like a raincoat. Like I'm wearing a raincoat and he is the drops of rain. Those little droplets, they just wash off of me. If he does something, I just kind of laugh because I'm like, yeah, this is what I grew up with, right? I'm used to it. And I know that it's sometimes difficult for people to understand who haven't had those experiences before, but eventually it does get to a point where I realize, like, I have lived an entire lifetime without him. I don't need him. I choose to have him in my life as much as he actually is, which isn't very much, but I don't need him. And all of a sudden, when I choose to forgive, those little moments that could really get at me, it's not like I'm even telling myself, don't let it bother you, don't let it bother. No, like it really truly does not bother me the same way it did before. And that's not to say it's never going to, right? It might. And that's the case with so many different things, right? If someone who, say that I, had a toxic relationship, right? That happened in the past. If this person were to come up and do a lot of the things that they did in the past, yeah, would I be angry? Yeah. Would I be frustrated? Yeah. Would I be hurt? Yeah. But it wouldn't bother me the way that it used to, because the way that it used to was like blood boiling, just anger, anger of like, how dare you treat me like that? How dare something like this happen? I cannot believe, all of these different things. And maybe I still think that, maybe I still recognize that, like, that's not fair treatment, that's not okay treatment, but it's not this type of anger that makes me feel like I'm in a prison anymore. It's not this type of feeling that makes me feel like if I were having the best day ever and that were to happen, would it ruin my day? No. it wouldn't ruin my day anymore. In the past, it would have. It maybe would have ruined my week, my month. I wasn't there yet. But now, today, I know that it wouldn't ruin my day at all. And I know that because honestly, I've had to experience. And it went from it ruining my week to it making me really stressed for a while, for a week, to, oh, okay, it's not comfortable, I'm not happy, but it doesn't ruin my day because I have separated myself from that. That to me is what forgiveness is. It is recognizing that you are a human being and this is a situation. It's recognizing that maybe this happened and maybe it sucks and maybe it was never okay, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't have anything to do with who you are, and you are separate from that. And then it is being able to live separate of that, being able to exist separate of that thing, being able to thrive separate of that. That to me is what forgiveness is. And I don't think there's one perfect way of how to forgive. I don't think that there's an equation for how to do it right. But I do think that there is a process. It takes time. It will take a different amount of time for everyone. But I think that the first step in that is like getting to know yourself. Getting to really focus on who you are. Like, who am I? Who am I despite this situation? You know, how did this situation make me feel? How do I feel? What is, naming your emotions, figuring out why maybe do you feel those emotions. And sometimes it might just be because someone was being terrible, right? Like, it's natural human emotions, right? We shouldn't neglect those, right? But we can figure out then to say, hey, this is the emotion I'm feeling. How can I respond to this in the healthiest way that I can at this moment? And the healthiest way that you can at this moment might continue to change as time moves on. Really doing that deep inner work, right? So forgiveness, it's never been easy and it never will be easy. It's not just saying, okay, I'm gonna move on because I said so, right? That's not it, right? It is deep inner work. It is work that you will feel so tired out with, work that you will just want to be done with, but someday it gets better. It's like after a breakup, the first few days, they suck. The first few weeks, the first months, even the first year maybe. Even the first year maybe, depending on how long that relationship was or what it meant to you, right? But as time moves on, you become more than that. You define your life outside of a relationship. And I think it's the same way with forgiveness. Maybe you are finding forgiveness for a past relationship, right? For a breakup. Or maybe it's something completely different, but the healing process, I feel like, is relatively similar there. There's going to be grief, there's going to be pain, there's going to be like, wow, a lot of times when we need to forgive someone, it's because there's a big sense of betrayal. And not always, but a lot of times it feels like a big sense of betrayal, or your safety is being hurt, your trust is being hurt. And it doesn't mean that those feelings need to change, right? Because ultimately those things, they might be your truth. It's not that I all of a sudden trust my father in everything that he says, right? He knows how to lie. He thinks he's good at it. It's not just saying, oh, hey, I all of a sudden trust everything or I believe everything. But it's saying that, I have moved past that emotion and I realize that I am capable without that, right? I am capable without that. I know how to work with it now. I know what to expect and I know what to say. Of like, you lie sometimes. You have basically you get to a point where you say, yes, you hurt me and it's in the past. That's a powerful thing. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is possible. Same with in a relationship, in a breakup, maybe I loved them, but that's in the past, right? Eventually you get to that point. Maybe you realize you didn't even love them at all, right? That's also possible too. But eventually you get to that point where you realize, hey, it's in the past. And I feel like it's very similar with forgiveness. So it takes time. It takes a lot of inner work. It takes a lot of healing. And it takes a lot of connections with people who you do trust around you. But it is possible. And that is why I do firmly believe that forgiveness is important in most situations. I don't want to say everyone deserves forgiveness, because I think that sometimes there are cases where maybe you don't deserve forgiveness. But I do think that everyone deserves to forgive. Everyone deserves to feel what it feels like to forgive, even when a situation was not okay. I'll see you next time.